Have you ever seen a child try to ask for help without saying a single word? In the middle of a busy train station, a little girl made one tiny silent signal to a police dog, and what happened next left the entire station frozen in disbelief. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me from which country and at what time are you watching this story? Morning drifted slowly over Santa Fe, spilling a soft blush across the adobe rooftops and the low hills beyond the rail yard. Officer Eli Mercer stood by his cruiser, coffee cooling in his hand, watching sunlight catch the thin steam from the cup. The city was already stirring vendors, raising the shutters of cafes. A church bell marking 7. The sound felt like a memory more than a moment, something that belonged to another life. He took a quiet sip and adjusted the collar of his worn jacket, pretending the motion could hide the loneliness that had followed him for years. Alder sat beside him, tail thumping once against the pavement. The German shepherd's vest gleamed faintly where the word Paulus caught the light. Eli looked down and smiled in spite of himself. "You and me again, partner," he murmured. The dog's ears flicked as though answering, and for a second, the air felt less empty. Inside the depot, travelers moved like a slow current: business suits, families with strollers, students wrapped in scarves against the desert chill. Eli had worked this station for almost 6 years, ever since he transferred from Albuquerque after the accident that had taken his wife and little girl. He rarely spoke of it. The past sat in him like the red dust under his boots, always there, no matter how often he brushed it off. Most mornings, he walked the same pattern, greeting vendors by name, nodding to the regulars, exchanging polite, "Morning, sir." "Yes, ma'am." He liked routine. It kept memories at a manageable distance. At the far end of the platform, an old man sold newspapers. "Morning, Officer Mercer," he called. "Autumn Fiesta starts this weekend. You bringing your dog to the parade?" Eli smiled, a faint lift of one corner of his mouth. "Maybe. He behaves better than most people I know." The man chuckled. Alder huffed softly, as if amused. The rhythm of the day was ordinary, which was exactly what Eli hoped for. Ordinary meant safe. He walked through the atrium, sunlight filtering through the skylight onto marble floors. The scent of coffee and cinnamon rolls drifted from the cafe near the ticket booths. A group of tourists chatted about canyon trails. A child laughed somewhere, high and bright. Eli found himself pausing, listening longer than necessary. It reminded him of his daughter's laugh, light, musical, gone too soon. He swallowed and kept moving. Alder trotted close, nose twitching, eyes alert but calm. They worked well without words. Eli watching faces, Alder reading the invisible language of scent and motion. Now and then a passerby reached out to pat the dog, and Eli gave the same gentle warning. "He's friendly, but on duty." Most people smiled and stepped back. Santa Fe loved its officers, especially those with 4 legs. Near the benches by track 3, a mother soothed a crying baby, while her older daughter balanced on one foot, pretending the yellow safety line was a tightrope. Eli slowed his pace, a habit born of caution, but the woman smiled up at him and said, "She's just playing." He tipped his hat. "All good, ma'am." The girl giggled, waving at Alder. The dog's tail gave a polite wag before he looked away, ever the professional. By 10 o'clock, the station filled with the comfortable hum of routine, announcements echoing, footsteps blending into the steady rhythm of travel. Eli leaned against a column, eyes scanning, letting the quiet confidence of the morning settle around him. In another hour, he'd take his lunch break at the diner across the street. Same booth, same turkey sandwich, same waitress who always called him honorable a predictable day, and he wanted nothing else. Then, faintly, he heard it, the change in tone that only years of patrol could teach a man to notice. It wasn't a sound exactly, more like the absence of one. A hush rippled through a small part of the crowd near the ticket gates. Alder's head turned first, ears stiff, body still. Eli followed his gaze. Nothing obvious, a family gathering their bags, a man checking his watch. But something about the way Alder's muscles tightened pulled Eli upright. He set down his coffee. "What is it, boy?" The dog didn't move, his eyes fixed on a shape beyond the moving crowd. Through the shifting crowd, Eli spotted the source of Alder's stare, a little girl, no older than 7, clutching her mother's hand as they moved toward the exits. Her brown hair caught the morning light like honey, and her small shoulders trembled under a faded pink jacket. Nothing seemed wrong at first. They could have been any family trying to catch a train. Yet Alder's attention never wavered. His tail stilled. His breathing shortened. The change in him was subtle but absolute. Eli frowned, instincts stirring beneath years of quiet habit. He trusted that dog more than any radio signal. "Easy," he whispered. "What are you seeing?" Alder didn't bark. Instead, his head tilted slightly, eyes locked on the child. She looked up at that exact moment, and their gazes met just for a heartbeat. There was something in her eyes that didn't belong in a morning like this. Fear, small but sharp, the kind a child tries to hide. She quickly turned away, tugging her mother's sleeve as if reminding her to move faster. The mother seemed calm, too calm. She guided the children, 3 of them, if Eli counted right with practiced precision. No rushing, no hesitation, but no warmth either. Her voice was low, her grip firm. Alder took a step forward, nails clicking softly on the marble floor. "Stay," Eli said under his breath, though his own pulse had quickened. A moment later, the woman and her children vanished into the current of travelers heading for track 2. The tension in Alder's body eased, but not completely. He sniffed the air once, then sat, eyes still scanning. Eli exhaled slowly. "You've been doing this too long, buddy," he murmured, but the unease stayed with him. Years ago, he might have shrugged it off. Now, after all the things he'd seen, the way evil sometimes wore an ordinary face, he had learned to listen to the quiet signals. He jotted a mental note to check security footage later. The depot's loudspeaker crackled to life. "Attention passengers. Train 407 to Albuquerque, departing in 15 minutes. The normal rhythm returned: laughter, rolling suitcases, the clink of coins in the vending machine. Still, the moment lingered like static in the air. Alder gave a low rumble, a sound between a sigh and a growl. Eli crouched beside him, scratching gently behind his ear. "Whatever it was, you felt it first, huh?" The dog's amber eyes lifted to meet his, steady and loyal. For the first time that day, Eli smiled for real. "Guess we'll keep watch a little longer." Outside, the sun had climbed higher, casting warm stripes of gold across the depot floor. A soft breeze carried the scent of roasting chili peppers from a nearby food stall, that unmistakable New Mexico comfort. 2 college students passed by laughing. A man tipped his hat in greeting, and the world seemed to return to its gentle order. But deep down, Eli knew peace could be fragile. One small thing out of place could change everything. He leaned against the column again, watching as Alder lay down at his boots, tail curled neatly, eyes half closed but never resting. The dog's calm reminded him of the promise he'd made years ago when he'd first joined the K-9 unit, to listen, even when no one else did. Back then, he'd thought it meant paying attention to danger. Now, he understood it meant paying attention to people, their silence, their trembling hands, their small, hidden pleas. A train whistle echoed from the distance, long and low, fading into the desert air. Eli glanced at his watch and thought about calling it a day, grabbing lunch at the little diner across the street where the waitress always kept his coffee warm without asking. Maybe today he'd even stay for a slice of pecan pie, small acts of normalcy, the kind that kept a man human. He turned to Alder. "You earned a break, partner." The shepherd blinked, stretching with a soft groan. "Come on, let's go before the crowd thickens." Together they walked toward the exit, the echo of their steps steady and familiar against the tile floor. Behind them, the depot carried on, just another day, just another hum of travel. No one noticed the little girl's face pressed briefly to the window of a passing train, or the faint pattern of her fingers tapping against the glass 5 quick beats, a pause, then 5 more. Only the dog lifted his head at the sound, ears twitching, eyes narrowing at the blur of the departing carriages. Eli felt the tug on the leash, gentle but insistent. He stopped and turned, puzzled. "What is it, boy?" The train was already rolling out, sunlight flashing across its silver sides. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw her again, the small figure in pink, looking back. Then she was gone. He stood there, the sound of the rails fading into silence. Alder whined softly, as if trying to say something he couldn't. Eli reached down, resting a hand on the dog's head. "All right," he said quietly. We'll look into it later. Outside, a wind stirred, carrying the scent of dust and distant rain. The old church bell rang 11 times, marking the hour. Eli glanced once more at the empty tracks before turning toward the street, unaware that the girl's silent message had already begun, a chain of moments that would test everything he believed about duty, forgiveness, and the quiet kind of courage that lives in the hearts of those who listen. By the next morning, the storm that had threatened the horizon never came. Santa Fe woke beneath a clear, pale sky, the kind that promised an ordinary day and sometimes delivered anything but. Officer Eli Mercer parked his cruiser beside the station just as the sun brushed the hills gold. He stretched, took one long sip of coffee, and felt the cool air settle against his skin. Inside, the world stirred again, vendors brewing espresso, conductors checking timetables, tourists with cameras ready for the weekend parade. Everything seemed right, almost rehearsed. Almost. Alder leapt down from the back seat, landing with a quiet thud. His nails clicked against the pavement as he followed Eli through the depot doors. The station smelled of polish and cinnamon, the same comforting mix that marked every morning. Eli nodded to the barista at the cafe counter. "Morning, Officer Mercer," she called. "The usual? You know me too well," he replied, offering a tired smile. The exchange felt good familiar, yet beneath it hummed a restlessness he couldn't name. He'd slept little. Half the night, he replayed the moment on the platform, the girl's eyes, that tiny pattern of her fingers against the glass. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe just a nervous child. Still, the image clung like dust that wouldn't shake off. Alder had sensed something. Eli was sure of it. And when a dog like Alder reacted, it meant there was a truth waiting under the surface. The intercom crackled. "Train 407, arriving from Albuquerque." Eli turned automatically, scanning the crowd. Same flow of commuters, same hum of rolling suitcases. He felt silly for expecting to see her again, yet part of him hoped she might reappear safe, smiling, proving he'd worried for nothing. He rubbed the edge of his badge absently, a habit he'd carried since the accident years ago, as though the metal could anchor him. Alder's sudden stillness broke his thoughts. The dog's head rose, ears forward. Eli followed his gaze toward the far end of the terminal, where sunlight poured through the glass doors. The morning crowd thinned there, revealing a cluster of security officers checking bags at random. A woman in a bright blue coat stood at the counter, answering questions, her tone polite but clipped. Beside her were 3 children, 2 boys, and a girl in a pink jacket, the same shade as yesterday's. Eli froze. "No way," he murmured. The little girl turned slightly, her hand brushing her mother's back. 5 quick taps, a pause, then 5 more. Alder's low growl rippled through the air like a whisper. Passengers nearby glanced over, uneasy. Eli placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. "Easy, partner." He felt the vibration through the leash, a steady, focused tremor. His instincts snapped awake. He started toward the family, moving slow, deliberate. The woman's posture stiffened when she saw the uniform. "Morning, ma'am," Eli said, keeping his voice even. "Just routine check-ins. Busy day ahead." She smiled, too quickly. "Of course, officer." Her accent was soft, hard to place. One hand rested protectively on the girl's shoulder. The child stared at Alder, eyes wide, unblinking. Then she mouthed something Eli almost missed. "Help." His stomach tightened. He crouched beside Alder, pretending to adjust the harness. "You see it too, boy?" he whispered. The dog's tail stiffened. His breath came slow and sharp. That was answer enough. The next seconds unfolded in silence that felt heavier than sound. Eli straightened, meeting the woman's eyes. "Mind if I ask where you're headed?" She hesitated. "Just a family trip, sir. We're visiting relatives near Denver." "Sounds nice," he said lightly, but his gaze stayed on the girl. "You kids excited?" The boys nodded uncertainly. The girl didn't speak. Alder stepped forward 1 pace, then another, his body taut with purpose. The woman shifted her purse to the opposite side, blocking him. Eli caught the move. "Ma'am," he said gently, "could I take a quick look inside your bag? Standard procedure before boarding." Her fingers tightened on the strap. "Is something wrong?" "No, just a spot check. Shouldn't take long." She glanced toward the ticket gate, calculating distance. Alder growled again, quiet, controlled, unmistakable. People began to notice. A man lowered his newspaper. A tourist lifted a phone. The air changed. Eli kept his tone calm. "Ma'am, please relax. Let's step aside for a moment." The woman's composure cracked. Fear flashed across her face like lightning. "We're late for our train," she said sharply. "That's all right," Eli replied. "Trains run every hour." For a breathless moment, neither moved. Then the girl looked up, eyes brimming, and whispered barely a breath, "Please, M." Eli's chest tightened. That single word, "please," cut through every sound in the depot. Before he could respond, the woman seized the girl's hand and turned sharply toward the gate. The boys followed, confusion clouding their faces. "Ma'am," Eli called, moving quickly. "Hold up a second." She didn't. The click of her heels quickened, echoing against the marble floor. Passengers turned to watch. Alder lunged forward, leash straining. His bark rang out deep, commanding, the kind that froze motion before it could become panic. Eli held firm but followed his partner's pull, weaving through startled travelers. "Easy, boy," he muttered, heart pounding. "Stay focused." The woman spun around, trembling. "Control your dog," she snapped. But her eyes betrayed more than anger, they showed terror. The little girl flinched, caught between them, tears glistening. Eli raised both hands, palms outward, his voice steady. "Nobody's in trouble. I just need to ask a few questions." For a long moment, silence ruled the air. Alder's growl softened into a low hum of vigilance. The woman's shoulders stiffened. She took half a step backward. "Ma'am," Eli said quietly, "I've been doing this a long time. Dogs like him don't act without reason." Her lips parted as if to argue, but no sound came. The little girl looked up again, and this time Eli saw it clearly, the same tapping pattern from yesterday. 5 quick presses against her mother's coat, like a pulse trying to break free. Eli's instincts clicked into place. It wasn't random. It was a signal. He knelt slightly, trying to make his tone gentle enough for a frightened child. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" The woman's reaction was instant, too sharp. "She doesn't need to answer you," she said, her voice cracking. "We're late." "M," Alder barked once, short and sharp, as if punctuating the truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Please," Eli said softly, eyes still on the girl. "You're safe here." Something shifted in her face. She wanted to believe him. Her lips trembled. "She said we're going on vacation," she whispered, barely audible. "But I don't know where." The words landed like stones. Around them, everything slowed, the footsteps, the chatter, even the hum of trains in the distance. Eli took a breath, his training and his humanity locking into the same rhythm. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "I'm going to need you to step aside." Her composure finally cracked. "You don't understand," she stammered. "If I stop now, they'll—" She didn't finish. Alder barked again, louder this time, eyes fierce but controlled. The sound ricocheted through the terminal, scattering whispers like wind through dry leaves. Eli motioned to a nearby security officer. "Lock the gate," he ordered. The man hesitated only a second before doing as told. The click of the latch sealed the moment. The woman's hands trembled. She clutched the little girl close, panic flickering in every movement. "I'm not who you think," she whispered. "I didn't want this." Eli softened his tone. "Then help me understand. What's in the bag?" She froze, staring at him with hollow eyes. "You don't want to know," she said. The tension was unbearable now, 2 heartbeats away from chaos. Eli stepped closer, his voice low but unwavering. "Ma'am, please put the bag down." The crowd seemed to hold its breath. Even Alder waited, body coiled but calm, gaze locked on hers. Finally, her strength broke. The bag slid from her shoulder, landing with a dull thump. Her knees wobbled. She caught herself on the bench. Tears welled, blurring the edges of her carefully painted calm. Eli knelt beside the bag, slowly unzipping it. The contents looked ordinary at first. Snacks, a folded blanket, travel papers. Then he noticed the small prepaid phone taped shut, and a second envelope tucked between children's clothes. Inside were photographs, grainy, distant shots of children at playgrounds, parks, schoolyards, dozens of faces, none smiling. A murmur spread through the bystanders. Eli's throat went dry. He looked at the woman. Who are you working for? She shook her head, sobbing. They said if I didn't bring them, they'd hurt my family. Please, I was trying to keep them alive. Alder shifted, sensing the tension drain into grief. He moved closer to the little girl, pressing his head gently against her hand. The child clung to him instantly, burying her face in his fur. Eli's voice softened. You did the right thing now, he said quietly. You stopped. Her tears fell freely. You don't understand, she whispered. It's not just me. There are more. They'll move them tonight. The statement hit Eli like a shock of cold air. He stood, motioning to the other officer. Call it in, he ordered. Now, the woman's gaze flickered between him and the dog, like she couldn't decide which frightened her more, the law or the truth. Eli crouched to meet the little girl's eyes one last time. You're safe now, he said softly. Nobody's going to take you anywhere. She nodded, her small fingers still curled in Alder's fur. He heard me, she whispered. Eli blinked. What did you say? She looked up with fragile certainty. He heard me when nobody else did. For a moment, everything around them disappeared. The noise, the crowd, even the harsh light of the terminal. All that remained was a man, a dog, and a child, who had managed to speak without words. Eli exhaled, placing a steady hand on Alder's back. Yeah, he murmured. He does that sometimes. The depot erupted again, officers arriving, radios buzzing, passengers whispering. But Eli hardly noticed. The sound was distant, muffled by something larger than noise. He looked down at Alder, whose calm brown eyes seemed to say what words could not. We're not done yet. As the escort led the woman away, the little girl turned once more, her voice small but clear. Thank you. Eli gave a nod she might never forget. You're welcome, sweetheart. Outside, clouds gathered over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, the first sign of rain in weeks. A wind moved through the square, carrying the faint scent of dust and change. Eli watched as the girl disappeared into the care of another officer. He reached for Alder's leash, but the dog wasn't looking at him. Alder's gaze fixed on the far end of the platform, somewhere beyond the station doors, beyond what anyone else could see. His tail lifted, alert once more. Eli followed his line of sight, unease creeping back into his chest. What is it, boy? He whispered. Alder gave a single low growl, the kind that spoke of unfinished business. Eli looked toward the gathering storm clouds and felt it too, that sense that something larger had just begun. Something that would test not only his duty, but the quiet faith he'd almost forgotten how to hold. The rain came after all. Not the heavy kind that floods streets, but a soft, steady drizzle that blurred the desert's sharp edges and hushed the noise of the city. Santa Fe glistened under silver clouds as Officer Eli Mercer parked outside the precinct, the rhythmic patter against his windshield lulling and restless all at once. Alder sat upright in the passenger seat, nose pressed to the window, watching water trace winding paths down the glass. Inside, the station smelled of coffee and wet leather. A television murmured news about the upcoming autumn fiesta, voices far too cheerful for the morning after what had unfolded at the depot. Eli hung his jacket on the rack and rubbed the sleep from his eyes. He'd been there all night. Interviews, reports, statements, hours of paperwork that couldn't quite explain what had really happened. How could words capture the sound of a frightened child's plea, or the look in her eyes when Alder understood before anyone else? Detective Ramos stepped out of his office, a file tucked under his arm. Heard you stirred up half the station yesterday, he said, half smiling. Eli shrugged. Wasn't me, it was the dog. That so? Ramos flipped open the file. You sure he's not psychic? Eli gave a dry chuckle. Wouldn't surprise me. Alder trotted to his rug in the corner, shook off the last of the rain, and curled up with a sigh. For all his training and precision, he was still just a creature of instinct and heart. Eli envied that simplicity. Ramos's tone turned more serious. The woman Celeste Duran. Fake name, fake IDs. But we found her real one, buried in a state database. She's linked to a group moving kids across state lines. You and your partner stopped something big. Eli stared at the folder, feeling the weight of it settle between his ribs. She said there were more. Ramos nodded. We're checking every lead. You'll want to read this before the feds take it over. He handed him the file. Eli thumbed through photographs. The envelope from the bag, the phone taped shut. lists of train schedules marked with red ink. One page caught his attention, an address scrawled in Celeste's handwriting, Warehouse 19, Old Industrial District. He remembered her words through tears. They'll move them tonight. He closed the folder slowly. You think she's telling the truth? She's terrified, Ramos said. That usually means yes. A faint bark drew their attention. Alder had lifted his head, ears twitching toward the window as thunder rumbled far away. Eli smiled faintly. Guess he agrees. Later that morning, he walked down the narrow hallway toward the holding room. The air smelled of stale coffee and rain-soaked uniforms. Through the glass, Celeste sat hunched at the metal table, hands clasped, hair loose around her face. Without the bright coat and the forced smile, she looked smaller, almost fragile. Eli entered quietly, closing the door behind him. You didn't sleep. She shook her head. You wouldn't either. Her voice was hoarse. He took the seat across from her. You said last night there were more children. Where? Her eyes flicked up to his. If I tell you, will you promise they'll be safe? That's the job, he said simply. Mine and his. He nodded toward the window where Alder sat waiting, visible through the glass like a silent sentinel. Celeste let out a shaky breath. You don't understand. I didn't choose this. She broke off, rubbing her arms as though the memory itself chilled her. I used to work for a travel agency. One day, a man offered me extra money to arrange documents for families who didn't exist. I thought it was harmless paperwork. Then one day they brought a child. Her words tumbled out, halting between sobs. By the time I realized what it was, I was trapped. They said if I went to the police, they'd find my son in El Paso. I haven't seen him in 4 years. Eli felt the old ache stir the ache of losing a child, of guilt too heavy for words. What's his name? He asked quietly. Mateo. Her voice broke on the word. He nodded slowly, letting silence hold them both. The rain tapped softly on the window, like a metronome to her confession. You can help me stop them, Celeste, he said finally. Help me bring the rest home. She hesitated, torn between fear and the smallest flicker of hope. They'll know I talked. Then we'll keep you safe, Eli replied. You have my word. For the first time, she met his gaze without flinching. There's a warehouse near the freight line, she said. They use the trains to move the kids. They're leaving tonight. Eli rose, his chair scraping softly. Thank you. She caught his sleeve before he reached the door. Officer Mercer, she whispered. You should trust your dog. He'll know where to go before you do. The afternoon deepened into a dim, rain-slicked dusk. The clouds over Santa Fe pressed low, turning the streets the color of pewter. Eli drove slowly through the industrial district, wipers beating a steady rhythm. Beside him, Alder sat alert, nose to the air, tail rigid. The city lights were starting to shimmer through the mist neon signs flickering against the adobe walls, puddles mirroring the world upside down. Warehouse 19 stood at the end of a gravel road, its windows blacked out, the metal siding rusted and streaked with rain. It looked like every other forgotten building out there except for the faint glimmer of a light that flickered once behind the loading door. Eli cut the engine. The sudden quiet felt heavy. He rested a hand on Alder's neck. Stay sharp, partner. No mistakes tonight. He stepped out, boots crunching gravel, the cool wind sliding under his collar. Alder followed silently, his fur dark with drizzle. The air smelled faintly of oil and wet earth, and something else faint, metallic, like fear itself had a scent. Eli crouched near a stack of crates, studying the faint glow through a cracked window. Voices murmured inside. Male, calm, confident. A truck idled nearby, its tailgate half open. He saw shapes moving 2 men, maybe 3, loading something large into the vehicle. Then, a small sound cut through the night, a muffled cry. He froze. It was a child's voice. Alder's ears snapped forward, muscles coiling. Eli whispered, "Quiet, boy." But the dog trembled with restrained instinct. He moved closer, keeping to the shadows. Through the crack of the door, he caught sight of them wooden crates stacked like a barricade, tarps draped over boxes, and in the middle, a woman kneeling beside 2 frightened kids. They couldn't have been older than 6 or 7. One clung to her arm. The other stared blankly at the floor. Eli's pulse hammered. He reached for his radio. "This is Officer Mercer. Requesting immediate backup, Warehouse 19 near Freight Line East. Suspected trafficking in progress. Static hissed. Then, a crackled reply. Copy that. Units en route. He looked at Alder. We can't wait. The shepherd gave a quiet, eager whine. Ready. Eli pushed the door just enough to slip inside. The air was thick with dust and exhaust fumes. A man near the truck turned, startled. Who the hell? Police, Eli barked. Hands where I can see them. Chaos ignited. The man shouted something. Another bolted toward the back exit. Alder lunged, intercepting him mid-stride, pinning him with a low growl that vibrated through the floor. The remaining man reached for something under his jacket, but Eli was faster, knocking him off balance, sending the weapon skidding across the concrete. Stay down, he ordered. The man hesitated, eyes darting toward the truck. Inside, the woman screamed, clutching the children closer. Ma'am, get back, Eli shouted. He kicked the pistol aside and cuffed the nearest suspect. Alder held the other firmly, teeth bared but controlled. The sirens were faint but approaching now, that distant promise of help cutting through the storm. Eli guided the kids behind a stack of crates, his voice low and steady. You're safe, all right. You stay right here. No one's gonna hurt you. One of them looked up. Is that your dog? Yeah, he said with a small smile. Best partner I ever had, the boy sniffled. He found us. Eli swallowed hard, a sudden wave of emotion hitting him. He's good at that. When backup arrived, the warehouse flooded with light and motion officers moving swiftly. The hum of radios, the metallic snap of handcuffs. Eli stood off to the side, rain dripping from his hat brim, watching as paramedics wrapped blankets around the rescued children. The woman who had guarded them, not Celeste, but another coerced victim, was trembling as she gave her statement. Ramos clapped a hand on Eli's shoulder. Hell of a night, Mercer. Eli nodded, too tired to smile. We got lucky. Lucky? Ramos scoffed. That's what you call instinct and a miracle, dog. Alder stood beside them, tail wagging faintly, chest rising with steady breaths. He was wet, tired, and perfect. As they loaded the suspects into patrol cars, Eli glanced toward the horizon where the clouds began to break. Faint pink light edged through the gray, reflecting off puddles like scattered glass. It reminded him of another dawn long ago, one that had ended differently. He crouched beside Alder. You did good, boy. The dog licked his hand, eyes soft, steady. Yeah, Eli murmured, his voice catching. You always know before I do. Later, in the quiet of the cruiser, Eli watched the raindrops race across the windshield. Ramos was on the phone outside, coordinating with the state unit. The air smelled of damp leather and relief. He reached for his thermos, took a slow sip, and closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of Celeste's words. You should trust your dog. He'll know where to go before you do. She'd been right. Maybe it wasn't just instinct. Maybe it was faith, the kind that doesn't come from seeing but from choosing to believe again. Alder shifted in the seat, resting his head on Eli's knee. The touch grounded him. For years he'd carried his grief like a weight around his chest. But tonight, for the first time, it didn't feel so heavy. Somewhere out there, children were safe because he'd listened. Eli looked out the window toward the dim horizon where the last of the storm faded into morning light. Let's go home, partner, he said softly. We've earned some quiet. The dog thumped his tail once against the seat. As they pulled away from the warehouse, the first rays of dawn pierced through the clouds, washing the wet streets in a faint gold glow. It looked almost like forgiveness, gentle, ordinary, and real. But in the rearview mirror, Eli caught sight of something that made him pause. A shadow near the fence, a figure watching the patrol cars disappear. A man in a dark coat, face hidden, phone pressed to his ear. He turned away before Eli could focus. Alder gave a low growl, eyes narrowing toward the mirror. Eli's hand tightened on the wheel. Yeah, he said quietly. I see him too. The light of morning faded behind them as they drove back toward the station, unaware that this night had opened more than one door. The storm was over, but something else was coming. By the next evening, Santa Fe had dried beneath a late autumn Sunday. The streets gleamed clean after the rain. The air scented faintly of sage and asphalt. Officer Eli Mercer parked his cruiser beside the old depot, again the same spot where everything had begun. The brick walls still held the warmth of daylight, and the plaza across the street buzzed with early preparations for the autumn fiesta. Paper banners fluttering, laughter spilling from food stalls, the sound of a mariachi trumpet practicing somewhere nearby. It should have felt like peace returning. It didn't. Alder paced restlessly beside the bench, leash slack but body tense. Even in the calm, the shepherd's nose kept tilting toward the wind, as if chasing a scent that memory alone could carry. Eli followed his gaze across the platform to where families waited for trains, ordinary people, ordinary noise. Still, a quiet unease lingered beneath it all. The station manager, a gray-haired man with a sun-creased face, stepped out to greet him. "Officer Mercer," he said, shaking his head. "Heard about last night. Folks around here are saying you and that dog saved half a dozen kids." Eli smiled faintly. "That's mostly true, but don't spread it too loud. Alder'll start expecting his own badge." The old man chuckled. "He's earned it, son." They shared a moment of laughter that faded too soon. Eli looked around, scanning faces, shadows, doorways. He couldn't shake the image of that dark-coated figure near the fence the night before. Every instinct told him the story wasn't finished. He leaned against a column, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. The wind lifted, carrying music from the plaza and the smell of roasting corn. A little boy waved from the crowd, grinning at Alder. The dog wagged politely, then turned his head again, nose twitching, alert. "Still restless, huh?" Eli murmured. "Yeah, me too." A familiar voice called from behind. "Guess you don't know how to take a day off." It was Naomi Vance, the young officer from the unit next door. Her hair pulled into a neat bun, uniform crisp. She carried 2 coffees and handed him one. "Chief says you're supposed to be home." "I will," he said, accepting it with a nod. "After this," she smirked. "You always say that." They stood in easy silence, watching the trains roll in and out. Naomi had a way of filling quiet moments without breaking them. She sipped her coffee and said softly, "Those kids you pulled out last night, they were scared, but one of them told me something. Said a lady told her to tap on the window if she ever got close to a police dog." Eli's hand stilled mid-sip. "Celeste?" Naomi nodded. "She must have told more than one. You think she was trying to warn us?" "Maybe. Or buy herself a little redemption." For a moment, they both watched Alder, who sat poised beside the bench, gaze steady on the main gate. The dog's patience seemed infinite, like a living stillness in motion. Naomi smiled. "He's something else." "Yeah," Eli said quietly. "He listens when I don't." The intercom crackled overhead. "Train 402 arriving from Denver." Eli's head lifted. "Denver?" he muttered. "That's where Celeste said they'd take them next." Naomi frowned. "You think someone's following through?" "I don't know," he said. "But I know the pattern." Alder rose suddenly, tail stiff, ears locked forward. His gaze fixed on the arriving train as it slowed with a screech of brakes. Passengers spilled out: businessmen, students, a woman juggling luggage, and a toddler. Then, near the last car, a man in a dark coat stepped onto the platform. Tall, lean, face partly hidden by a hat. Eli felt his pulse quicken. "Naomi," he said softly. "See the guy in the coat?" "Yeah," she whispered. "Same one from the fence?" "Looks like it." "And—" The man scanned the crowd, his eyes passing over them without pause. Calm, detached, professional. He carried no visible luggage, only a small black case, clutched loosely in one hand. Alder let out a low growl. Naomi's hand drifted toward her holster. "You want me to run him?" "Not yet," Eli said. "Let's see where he goes." The man moved with purpose, stepping off the platform and crossing toward the plaza. Eli followed at a distance, Naomi beside him. The air around the festival shimmered with color and sound, children chasing confetti, a brass band tuning their instruments, the smell of cinnamon and fried dough. It made the man's stillness stand out all the more. He stopped near a food stall, spoke briefly to the vendor, and then turned down a narrow alley between buildings. Eli and Naomi exchanged a glance. "Back up?" she asked. "Not yet," Eli replied. "We don't spook him." They slipped through the crowd, following the faint echo of boots on stone. The alley was dim, lined with crates and hanging lights that swayed in the wind. When they rounded the corner, the man was gone. Eli's eyes swept the shadows. Nothing. No sound, no movement. Only Alder, standing motionless at the mouth of the alley, ears pricked toward something beyond human hearing. The alley smelled faintly of damp stone and spice from the nearby food stalls. The lights above flickered, making the walls pulse between gold and shadow. Eli held up a hand for Naomi to stop. Alder stood still. His whole body pointed toward a small wooden door at the far end, quiet, but certain. Eli whispered, "He's here." They moved slowly, footsteps soft against the cobblestone. From inside came the faint hum of a voice, male, steady, talking on the phone. Eli caught fragments. "Tonight, freight line. Make sure the route's clear." That was all he needed. Eli pushed the door open. "Police!" The man turned, startled, eyes cold and calculating. For a heartbeat, everything froze, then he bolted toward the back exit. Alder leapt before Eli could react, cutting off the escape with a sharp bark that echoed through the narrow space. "Down!" Eli shouted. The man stopped, hands raised, chest heaving. Naomi stepped in, cuffs ready. "You picked the wrong town, mister." When it was over, the alley returned to silence, except for Alder's low panting. Eli exhaled, the tension leaving him like a tide. "Good work, boy," he murmured, scratching behind Alder's ear. The man's phone buzzed where it had fallen. On the screen, a map routes marked with red lines leading to multiple stations. Beneath it, a single message waiting to send. "Shipment confirmed. Proceed at dawn." Naomi's eyes widened. "This isn't over." Eli nodded, gaze softening on Alder. "No," he said quietly. "But we just cut the head off the snake." Outside, the sounds of the fiesta swelled again. Laughter, guitars, the smell of roasted corn. Life carried on, unaware of the storm that had nearly passed through. Eli looked up at the twilight sky. "Sometimes," he said to Naomi, "you get to stop the darkness before it reaches the kids." "That's enough." Alder brushed against his leg, eyes reflecting the warm glow of festival lights. For a moment, the world felt simple again, safe, ordinary, and good. But somewhere across the plaza, unseen among the crowd, another phone lit up. A message flashed on its screen. "He's on to us!" Morning light poured gently over Santa Fe, brushing the adobe walls with gold. Officer Eli Mercer sat outside Mesa Dawn Diner, nursing his coffee while Alder dozed at his boots. After a night of storms and arrests, the world looked peaceful again, too peaceful to trust. Grace Holloway, the diner's waitress, topped off his cup. "You look like you fought the devil, sugar." Eli smiled. "More like his paperwork." She winked. "Then you'd better have a donut." Across the street, the autumn fiesta bustled with laughter and music. Families wandered beneath bright paper banners, unaware of how close the darkness had crept the night before. Naomi Vance appeared, hair still damp from the morning shower, folder in hand. "They moved the suspect to Albuquerque," she said, sliding into the chair. "His phone shows routes across 3 states. This thing's huge." Eli stirred his coffee. "Always is." Alder lifted his head at her voice. Naomi reached down, smiling. "At least your partner never second-guesses you." "He just listens better," Eli replied softly. The light caught his badge, that quiet gleam of duty he couldn't put down. Naomi studied him a moment. "You ever stop caring what happened?" Eli looked away toward the plaza. "Dogs don't live in yesterday. I'm trying to learn that." His phone buzzed. A message from Detective Ramos. "Got something. Bring the dog." Minutes later, they reached the precinct. Ramos waited beside a van, holding an evidence bag. "Memory card from the black case. Watch this." Inside the briefing room, the projector flickered to life-grainy footage from different stations. In every clip, a woman in a blue coat led a child by the hand. Naomi whispered, "Celeste." Ramos froze the frame. Next to her stood a tall man in a dark coat. Eli's jaw tightened. "So she wasn't running the show?" Ramos nodded grimly. "No. She was working for him." Alder gave a low growl that filled the room's silence, a sound that felt like truth. The projector's glow dimmed, leaving the room wrapped in silence. Eli leaned back, the truth settling like a stone in his chest. Celeste hadn't been leading the operation, she'd been following orders. Naomi crossed her arms. "You think she's still alive?" Hard to say, Ramos replied. But if she is, she's running from both sides now. Eli rubbed his temples. She tried to warn us, Naomi. That signal, the girl, the note. She was buying time. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the hills. Not another storm, but the echo of one still moving beneath the surface. Alder sat by the door, gaze fixed on Eli. His quiet loyalty steadied the room. Eli crouched beside him, hand resting on the shepherd's fur. You knew from the start, didn't you, boy? Naomi exhaled slowly. If she was forced, she might try to contact you again. You're the only one she trusts. Eli nodded. Then, we listen. Ramos closed the folder. I'll alert the other units. But Mercer, if she reaches out, don't play hero. We do this by the book. Eli smiled faintly. Sure, by the book. But his mind was already somewhere else, the desert road outside town, the faint sound of train whistles at night. He could almost hear Celeste's voice trembling through the glass. They'll move them tonight. As he left the station, the evening sky burned orange over the mountains. Alder trotted beside him, tail low, eyes calm. The scent of rain still lingered, blending with the smoke of roasting corn from the festival downtown. Life carried on, unaware of the battle still unfolding quietly behind it. Eli paused at the crosswalk, looking toward the depot in the distance. The wind shifted, carrying the faint clang of a train bell. He whispered, We're not done, are we? Alder gave one quiet bark, the kind that wasn't alarm, but answer. Eli smiled tiredly. Didn't think so. Somewhere beyond the hills, another phone rang. A woman's trembling voice whispered, He found me. The sun slipped low behind the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, washing Santa Fe in copper light. Officer Eli Mercer stood outside the precinct with a cup of black coffee gone cold in his hand. The festival was ending downtown, its fading music drifting like a memory through the cooling air. Alder sat beside him, tail flicking lazily, golden eyes fixed on the horizon, as if he could still sense the echoes of something unfinished. Naomi stepped out, jacket slung over her shoulder. You waiting for the moon or a miracle? Eli smiled faintly. Whichever shows up first. She leaned on the railing beside him. Ramos wants you on early patrol tomorrow. The Bureau's taking over the trafficking case, but they still want your notes. Sure, he said. They'll file them somewhere quiet and forget the names by next week. You sound tired. I'm tired of kids needing saving, he said softly. The street lamps flickered on, humming faintly. A train whistle echoed from the distance, long and mournful. Eli froze. The sound brought back the station, the trembling girl, Celeste's terrified eyes, the sharp bark that had broken silence and saved a life. He still couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Inside the precinct lobby, the phone at the desk rang twice, then again. The night clerk waved him over.
For you, Mercer.
Eli frowned, picking up the receiver. Officer Mercer. Static hissed for a second. Then a woman's voice whispered thin and cracking. They know. I told you too much. He straightened. Celeste, where are you? A breath. Not safe. Don't trust the ones in black cars. They found another route, Arizona line. Children on the move. Celeste. Listen to me. Stay where you are. I can... But the line went dead. Naomi caught his look as he hung up. What is it? Celeste, he said quietly. She's alive. They moved quickly back into the operations room, maps lit under fluorescent lights. Eli traced a finger west across the state border. Arizona line. That means freight routes out of Gallup. Naomi's brow furrowed. That's 6 hours away. Then we'd better start now. Minutes later, the cruiser sped down the empty highway, siren off, the desert stretching endlessly beneath a silver moon. The radio crackled with faint chatter from other units, but Eli barely heard it. The night wind roared through the open window. Alder's ears streamed back, alert and eager. Naomi studied him from the passenger seat. You really think she's trying to help? She could have run. Instead, she called. Or she's being used? Maybe both, Eli said, eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. Either way, someone's got to show up. The silence between them thickened with the hum of tires on asphalt. Cacti flashed by like sentinels. Every few miles, a passing truck bathed the cruiser in gold before fading into shadow again. Alder shifted suddenly, nose to the air, growl low and steady. Eli glanced at the GPS screen. He smells something, he murmured. They rounded a bend where a single freight car sat abandoned on a side track, its metal sides gleaming pale under moonlight. Naomi frowned. That wasn't on the manifest. Eli pulled over, heart tightening. Let's check it. They stepped into the cold air, flashlights cutting through the dark. The train car's door stood slightly ajar, a faint sound drifting from within, not machinery, not the wind. A child's cry. Eli's pulse surged. He motioned to Naomi, then whispered to Alder, "Easy, boy. Slow." The shepherd crept forward, nose pressed to the crack of the door, tail stiff. Then, without hesitation, he barked once clear, certain, calling them closer. Eli pulled the heavy door aside. The metal screeched, echoing into the night. Inside, the beam of his flashlight revealed what his heart already feared. 3 children huddled together beneath a torn blanket, eyes wide, cheeks streaked with dirt and tears. Naomi gasped softly. "Oh my God!" Eli crouched low, voice gentle. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe now." The smallest girl flinched at first, then looked past him toward Alder. The dog stood still at the threshold, tail low, eyes warm and steady. Slowly, she reached out a trembling hand. Alder stepped forward and pressed his nose against her palm. The girl let out a tiny sob and clung to his fur. Naomi covered her mouth, tears glinting in her eyes. "They would have left them here." Eli nodded, jaw tight. "Not tonight." He radioed in. "This is Mercer. We found them. 3 minors alive. Requesting medical and backup at mile marker 78. The dispatcher's voice cracked through static. "Copy that, Mercer. Help's on the way." Eli helped the children out one by one, wrapping them in blankets from the trunk. Naomi poured water into paper cups, her hands shaking slightly. The desert air had turned cold. But the first hint of dawn glowed faintly on the horizon. The oldest boy whispered, "She said you'd come." Eli blinked. "Who?" "The lady in the blue coat. She said the dog would find us." He exchanged a look with Naomi, no words needed. Celeste had led them here. When the rescue vans arrived, the children were carried inside, sleepy but safe. Eli stood watching the lights fade down the road until only silence remained. Alder sat beside him, ears pricked toward the east, where the sky began to blush pink. Naomi said softly, "She saved them through you." Eli nodded. "And we're not done yet." He looked down at Alder, who gave a quiet huff, as if in agreement. The wind shifted, carrying the first warmth of morning. "Come on, partner," Eli murmured, resting a hand on his fur. "Let's bring her home." By sunrise, the desert shimmered gold. The rescued children slept in the back of the van, wrapped in blankets. As Eli and Naomi drove behind the convoy, Alder leaned against the window, nose twitching toward the wind. Naomi broke the silence first. "So, what now?" Eli's gaze stayed on the road. "We find Celeste. She's still out there and she's running out of time." At the Gallup checkpoint, a sheriff handed Eli a sealed envelope. "Found this at a bus station 20 miles out. It's addressed to you." Inside was a single photo. Celeste, standing with the girl from the train, both smiling faintly. On the back, scrawled in hurried ink, "I can't run anymore. They're watching the motel near Route 9. Trust the dog." Eli exhaled. "She's calling us in." Naomi frowned. "Could be a trap." He nodded. "Or a confession." They reached Route 9 by afternoon. The old Sunset Motel stood alone against the horizon flickering sign, cracked parking lot, and curtains drawn in every window. Eli parked a distance away. Alder sat upright, every sense alive. Eli knelt beside him, voice low. "Find her, boy." Stead. The dog jumped down, nose sweeping the wind. He padded toward room 12, tail stiff. Eli followed, heart steady but heavy. He could almost feel Celeste's fear in the air, that quiet pulse of someone who'd run too long. He knocked once. Silence. Then a faint sound, not movement, but a breath. "Celeste," he said softly. "It's Eli. You called me." A pause. The door clicked open 2 inches, a single brown eye peeking through. "You came." Eli lowered his voice. "You saved those kids. Let us help you now." Behind him, Alder gave a soft whine warning and compassion folded together. Naomi watched the road, hand near her holster, eyes sharp. From inside, Celeste's whisper broke. "They're already here." The motel room smelled of dust and fear. Celeste stood in the half-light, clutching a phone in one trembling hand. Her eyes darted toward the thin curtains, where the rumble of an engine echoed faintly outside. Eli stepped inside, motion slow and calm. "We're here to help you," he said. She shook her head. "You don't understand. They never work alone." Naomi scanned the parking lot through the blinds. 2 black SUVs had just turned in, headlights off, moving slow and deliberate. Eli Company. Alder tensed, ears forward, low growl vibrating in the air. Eli looked at Celeste. "Is there another way out?" She nodded toward the bathroom window. "Back alley." "Go," he said. "Now." They moved fast. Naomi guided Celeste through the narrow window, while Eli covered the door. The sound of boots hit gravel outside, then voices, sharp and close. "Find her. Check every room," Eli whispered. "Alder, guard." The dog slipped into position near the window, silent but ready. The first SUV door slammed shut. Footsteps approached. The door burst open, and a man in black stepped through, flashlight cutting the dark. Eli caught his wrist before the weapon cleared the holster, twisting it down and shoving him back against the wall. The fight was quick, clumsy, desperate, then over. Outside, Naomi's voice called softly. "We're clear." Eli turned, breath ragged. "Go, get her in the car." He followed them out the back just as Alder bounded beside him, fur bristling, eyes bright in the moonlight. The roar of engines rose again, the SUVs tearing toward the main road. But they didn't chase. They stopped. One window rolled down. A man's face, barely visible. A calm, cold smile. Then the car backed away and vanished into the desert night. Celeste collapsed against the car, shaking. "He's not going to stop," she whispered. "You don't know what he's capable of." Eli steadied her shoulder. "Then we make sure he never gets another chance." The horizon glowed faintly, the first breath of dawn brushing the desert sky. Naomi started the engine. Alder sat in the back, watching the receding road, eyes steady, ready for whatever came next. Somewhere behind them, a phone buzzed in an abandoned SUV. A voice on the other end said, "He's protecting her now. Change the plan." By dawn, the sky above the New Mexico desert turned pale gold. The road stretched empty for miles, quiet except for the hum of the cruiser and the steady rhythm of Alder's breathing in the back seat. Celeste sat between Eli and Naomi, hands clasped tight around a folded piece of paper. Her face looked worn, but her eyes no longer carried that hunted glaze. Eli drove without speaking, letting the silence mend what words couldn't. Every so often, he'd glance at her reflection in the rearview mirror. She met his gaze once, hesitant. "I didn't want it to be this way," she murmured. "I just wanted my son back." "I know," he said softly. "You did the right thing when it mattered." Emsting. Naomi unfolded a map on her lap. "The Bureau will meet us in Holbrook. You'll be safe there, Celeste." Celeste nodded, voice barely a whisper. "Safe isn't what I want anymore. I want to stop running." The desert wind pressed against the car, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Eli thought about his own past, the loss that had hollowed him, the years he'd spent chasing ghosts instead of peace. Beside him, Alder shifted, resting his head on Eli's shoulder for a moment. The simple gesture said everything. "You can stop running too." They pulled into a roadside diner just as the sun rose fully. The place looked like every other diner in the Southwest. Faded sign, chipped mugs, and a waitress who'd seen everything. Inside, the coffee was hot. The air smelled of cinnamon and bacon. And for the first time in days, no one was watching them. Celeste held the folded paper out to Eli. "This is the list," she said. "Names, routes, everything they planned. I kept it hidden. You'll need it." He took it carefully. "You did good, Celeste," she smiled weakly. "I didn't do it alone." Her eyes moved to Alder. "He knew before I did what was right." Alder wagged his tail once, as if understanding the praise. Outside, trucks rolled past on the highway, their headlights cutting through the early light. Life was moving forward again, ordinary, unknowing, and precious. Naomi returned from the counter with 3 mugs. "So what happens after Holbrook?" Eli looked out the window. "Maybe a new start. For all of us. Celeste managed a small, genuine smile. You think redemption really exists, Officer Mercer? He met her gaze and said quietly, every time someone chooses to tell the truth instead of hide it, yeah, I think it does. Alder barked once, tail thumping, the sound echoing like a benediction. By the time they reached Holdbrook, the morning sun had climbed high over the mesas. The FBI convoy waited at the edge of town, clean vehicles, polished badges, and the end of a long chase. Celeste stepped out slowly, the desert wind tugging at her hair. Eli walked beside her. You sure about this? She nodded. It's time. Naomi opened the back door for Alder, who jumped down and trotted to Celeste's side. The shepherd stopped, looking up at her with steady eyes. She crouched, running a trembling hand through his fur. Thank you, she whispered, for hearing what no one else did. Eli stood a few feet away, watching. In that moment, he saw the full circle of it, the broken woman who had once been part of something dark, now choosing light, and the dog who had never stopped listening. When the agents led Celeste toward the building, she turned one last time. Tell your boy, she hesitated, voice shaking. Tell him his mom tried to make it right. Eli's throat tightened. I will, he said softly, though they both knew she was talking to herself. Later, the paperwork was done. Statements given. The case was officially out of his hands. Yet as Eli stepped out into the parking lot, sunlight spilling over the red earth, he didn't feel empty, just quiet. Naomi joined him, sipping from a paper cup. So, she said, you finally gonna take a break? He smiled faintly. Maybe. Might head up north for a while. There's a shelter that trains dogs for therapy work. Alder could use a vacation too. Naomi grinned. You mean you could? Eli chuckled. Yeah, maybe. He looked down at his partner, who stood beside him, tail swaying, eyes soft. You think you're ready for retirement, buddy? Alder barked once, as if to say, not yet. They both laughed a small sound, but full and real. As they drove back toward Santa Fe, the land opened wide and golden ahead of them. Families would be waking, children running through backyards, trains humming softly in the distance, the ordinary heartbeat of a world still worth saving. Eli rolled down the window, letting the desert wind wash over his face. He thought about all the lives that had crossed his Lily, Celeste, those nameless children, and how one act of listening had changed everything. Sometimes, he said quietly, glancing at Alder in the mirror, saving someone else is how you find your way home. The dog gave a soft huff, curling up in the seat, content. The road stretched on beneath a rising sun, warm and endless. And for the first time in years, Eli Mercer didn't feel alone. Sometimes, the end of a long road doesn't come with applause or headlines. It comes quietly, in the soft thump of a loyal dog's tail against a dusty patrol seat, or the slow exhale of a man who's finally learned how to forgive himself. Officer Eli Mercer drove home beneath the rising light, and beside him sat the partner who never stopped believing that goodness still had a scent worth following. Somewhere, far beyond the desert and the trains and the noise, a little girl laughed again because one person and one dog chose to listen when no one else did. Stories like these don't end. They settle into the corners of our hearts, the way an old song lingers after the last note fades. For Eli, redemption wasn't a single heroic act, it was 100 small choices. To stay, to care, to trust again. And for Alder, it was simply doing what came naturally. Protecting, listening, loving without question. Together, they reminded us that courage often wears ordinary faces, and that kindness still walks quietly among us, 4 paws at a time. Maybe you've known someone like that, a neighbor who checks in when no one else does, a friend who listens without judging, or the steady warmth of family gathered around a Sunday table. In a world that rushes too fast, these small gestures are what hold it together. Because, just like the porch light that burns softly through the night, unconditional love can guide us home long after we've lost our way. The lesson? Love and redemption are never out of reach. True strength isn't about how many battles we win, but how many hearts we heal along the way. Everyone deserves a second chance to be seen, to be forgiven, to belong. And happiness, more often than not, arrives when we stop chasing it and start giving it away. So tonight, as you sit with your cup of coffee or rock gently on that front porch swing, take a moment to remember it doesn't take much to change a life. A single act of compassion can echo farther than any wealth or title. Like a quiet lamp glowing in the window of a small-town home, one kind heart can still light the darkest road. If this story touched your heart, press 1 inch the comments so I'll know you're listening out there. And if you think it could be told better, press 0, because every voice matters when we share stories of hope, love, and the strength of family. Thank you for spending this time with me. May your home always be warm, your heart forgiving, and your nights filled with gentle light.